YouTube, what's going on? It's been a few months here on First and 10, but as we get ready to ramp up NFL draft season, want to kick off and start to put together the predictions of everything that happened in the offseason and how that's going to translate into the upcoming football season. We've seen a few highlights already in the preseason, but let's get right to it. I think one of my favorite things I always love to do is to talk about what teams hit home runs with their big moves in the offseason and what teams really made colossal mistakes. And let's just get right to that. When we start in terms of some moves that teams are going to live to regret, number 5, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Rams trading 2 number 1 picks for Matthew Stafford. Now, before everybody gets crazy here, let me be very clear here. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have made the Matthew Stafford trade. I'm not saying they should not have upgraded over Jared Goff. But if you're the Rams, you already have a very, very tight roster in terms of you're very top heavy. Okay, the Rams are a single injury away from their season going up in smoke, and right now they are in very much win now mode. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey are in the primes of their careers, and you're already down Cam Akers. Okay, so you gave up 2-1 to get Ramsey. Now you've given up 2-1s to get Stafford. All right. You are very thin on the offensive line. Andrew Whitworth is about 40 years old. I mean, this Rams team is playing with fire. I love the pickup of Matthew Stafford, but the price tag was extraordinarily too high. I think the Rams are a team that is just bound to trip and fall, one injury away from missing the playoffs, let alone going to the Super Bowl. Number 4, the Houston Texans. I mean, Houston, I get it. You don't want to trade Deshaun Watson, and before all the scandals broke loose, I get it. You've got a once-in-a-decade generational talent, but he doesn't want to be there. And when players don't want to play for you anymore, Houston, you got to let them go, especially given the fact Houston's roster is by far and away the worst in the NFL. They've burned so much of their draft capital with the prior coaching regime, and now you're trying to figure out, okay, can you actually build around Deshaun Watson? You had a short window there where you could maximize his value, and the talk was 3 number 1s, maybe a couple of young starters. If you could have got anywhere close to that, you pull the trigger and you just start over. You rebuild, as painful as that is. But he doesn't want to be there. And now with the scandal and the fact that you can pretty much bet he's not going to play this year, probably puts them square in the driver's seat to pick number 1 next year and pick a quarterback. Well, what are you going to do with Deshaun Watson and a first overall pick quarterback or second overall pick quarterback? Your negotiating power is completely gone. And so now you're looking at maybe you get A1 if a team's willing to roll the dice, but the value of Deshaun Watson tremendously diminished. You had a short window to operate there, Houston. Bad move, but what else could you expect? It's a very poorly run organization. Number 3, this wasn't directly in the offseason, but it happened during the season last year. It's bled into the offseason, is Jamal Adams. Again, this is not necessarily a player that I don't think is a very talented player. You definitely want to keep him if you're Seattle, but you never should have paid that price to begin with. 2 number 1s and a number 3 and a player to get a guy who's a safety. Great pass rushing safety, but in his entire career in the NFL has never recorded a single interception. I'm sorry, but if you're an all-world defensive back, you'd think that just out of dumb luck you would have made a single pick. I like Jamal Adams. I'm not as high on him as a lot of other people are. And Seattle, much like the Rams, very paper-thin roster and a lot of holes. A lot of holes on that offensive line, a lot of holes on that defensive line, and you give up all that draft capital to secure a guy who's a safety who's now holding out and knows he's going to get what he wants, who wants not just highest-paid safety money, but linebacker quality money. More power to him. If I'm Jamal Adams, I'm asking for defensive end pass rusher money because I'm the best pass rusher on the Seahawks, and their defense is nothing without him. So I thought Seattle really whiffed and spent way too much money to get Jamal Adams. Next one is the Denver Broncos. Listen, the Denver Broncos roster is ready to win now. It's all going to boil down to whether or not Drew Lock can actually play. Because let's be real, okay? Teddy Bridgewater is not taking this team to where they want to be. Teddy Bridgewater is not going to compete with Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to compete with Justin Herbert. And this roster is ready to win now. And you're sitting there at 9, and the draft gods shine down on you, and they put Justin Fields right into your lap at the 9th pick, and you pass. You pass on him because your starting quarterback had the lowest QBR in the league last year. So you're banking that Drew Lock is going to take a Josh Allen type leap with Pat Shurmur and Vic Fangio as their coaches. I love Patrick Surtain. Think he was a great pick, going to be a great player, but he could be the next Deion Sanders. It's not going to tip the balance of power in Denver's favor, not only to win the Super Bowl, but let alone just get out of their own division with Mahomes and Herbert. So I think that George Patton could live to regret that for a long time, passing on Justin Fields for a cornerback. I thought Denver made a huge mistake not getting their quarterback of the future and continuing to roll the dice with Drew Lock. The only one that tops that one is the Baltimore Ravens trading Orlando Brown. Listen, if you think that you need to pass Orlando Brown on because you can't afford to pay him and Ronnie Stanley, you've got Lamar Jackson's contract coming up, I don't necessarily know I agree with that logic. If you're fortunate enough to have 2 all-pro tackles heading into the prime of their career, you figure out how to keep them. All-pro tackles do not grow on trees. But the least that you do is you don't trade them inside the conference. You don't trade them to your biggest obstacle to get to the Super Bowl, who you can't even beat as it is, and reload them for the foreseeable future. Not only that, you don't trade them to that team for less than nothing. I mean, if anybody learned anything from the Super Bowl, it's that Kansas City's Achilles heel is to get after Patrick Mahomes. So why on earth the Baltimore regime felt the need to trade Orlando Brown to the Chiefs for a handful of beans is absolutely shocking. I have no idea what the Ravens were thinking. It was a horrible trade on their part. Not only that, you basically traded Orlando Brown, a 2-time Pro Bowl, all-pro offensive tackle. You basically traded him to move up a round. So you basically swapped a second round for a first-round pick because they sent their number 2 back to Kansas City to get Kansas City's 1. That was the crux of the trade. It was awful. You look at the Houston Texans spent 2 number 1s and change to acquire Laremy Tunsil a few years ago from the Dolphins. You look at the fact that we just talked about the Seahawks traded 2 1s and a 3 to get a safety in Jamal Adams. It was an atrocious trade by the Ravens, and then they turned around and they didn't replace him. They replaced him with a 30-some-year-old veteran offensive tackle, Alejandro Villanueva, from the Steelers, who felt that he was too old and washed up and couldn't play anymore. I thought it was a monumental failure of the Baltimore Ravens, and they're going to live to regret that for a long time because now the Kansas City Chiefs have blindside protection for Mahomes for at least the next 10 years. These offensive tackles play well into their 30s, and Orlando Brown is 4 years in the league. So big mistake by the Ravens, and I'm sure the rest of the league is just looking at the Ravens going, really appreciate that one, guys. Moving on to the best 5 moves that I thought happened in the offseason without flipping the other ones in reverse. We'll start at number 5. I really like the Hassan Reddick pickup by the Carolina Panthers. He was an under-the-radar pickup, a 1-year deal, $8 million. The guy had 12.5 sacks. That's what he was originally drafted by the Cardinals for 4 years ago, and it took him a little while to really gain his footing inside the NFL. But 12.5 sacks last year. He comes to a Carolina Panthers defense that's really on the verge. They got a lot of good young talent on that defense. They're going to look to ride with Sam Darnold at quarterback. This is a team that could surprise some people, potentially make the playoffs. I think Atlanta is just ready to fold. I think that team is on the verge. I don't know what to expect from the Saints without Drew Brees. So this is a team that could sneak up, potentially get themselves into the playoffs. And anytime you pick up a young pass rusher, that's always going to help. So I really like that pickup. Number 4 was Julio Jones and Bud Dupree for the Tennessee Titans. Love the Julio Jones pickup. They needed a second threat to go with A.J. Brown. This offense can really do some damage, but Ryan Tannehill needs more targets to throw to. Their offensive line is in rock-solid shape. They picked up a right tackle in the second round of the draft. Their defense has just been lacking a true star pass rusher. And even though Dupree's coming off that ACL injury, they're really trying to build around Simmons in the middle of that defense. It's a good young defense. I love the moves by the Titans because they are also a team that's ready to win now, and I do believe they're the division favorites. Regardless of what people say about the Colts, I think the Titans are going to win the AFC South. The third one is Joe Johnson and Jadeveon Clowney by the Cleveland Browns. So the Cleveland Browns roster is not a roster that has many holes. This is a really talented football team. And so anytime you're able to find the very few holes that you need to fill inside of free agency and get quality starters at really affordable prices, these were great pickups by the Browns. And their roster is just stacked. I fully expect them to win the AFC North and get back to the playoffs again. I expect them to make a deeper run. We'll see where Baker Mayfield can take those guys. Really like those moves by the Browns. Number 2, J.J. Watt, Rodney Hudson, that pair for the Arizona Cardinals. Listen, the Arizona Cardinals just need to get more physical. They're way too finesse. I do love their pass rush ability. I love their ability to score points, but when it comes down to it, can they run the ball and can they stop the run and can they just get physical inside the trenches? Rodney Hudson, a veteran multi-Pro Bowler center who's still very much got a lot left in the tank, and we all know J.J. Watt. And he comes in now to play opposite of Chandler Jones in the pass rush. They've got a couple of young stud linebackers now in Collins and Isaiah Simmons that can really get after it in the backfield as well. I love what Arizona did, and as much as everybody talks about the Niners, the Rams, and the Seahawks, this is the toughest division in football. Remember last year, the Cardinals were 6-3 at one point before the end of the year when they suffered all those injuries. So I fully expect Arizona to be a force to be reckoned with in the NFC West. Last but not least, the Kansas City Chiefs, who benefited big time from that Orlando Brown trade. Before that even happened, though, they picked up Joe Thuney, the guard out of New England, and got him on a big-time 5-year contract. Kansas City did the one thing that they needed to do. They reloaded the O-line with superstar talent. They paid a lot of money for Thuney. They're going to pay a lot of money for Brown. But again, these offensive linemen guys, they play so much longer into their careers. And the one thing that Kansas City showed is that if they're going to win Super Bowls, they have to be able to protect Patrick Mahomes. And Thuney was a huge pickup for them, is a huge pickup to protect him, to open holes for that run game. As scary as it sounds, Kansas City Chiefs are not only going to be back next year, they're going to be around for a long time, guys. So big win for them, big win in free agency. I will be back again soon, guys, with more predictions for the upcoming season as we draw closer to opening day in a couple of weeks. Preseason's already off and running. It's getting exciting this time of year. I know you guys love it too. Would love to hear your comments, love to hear your feedback, guys, but look to hear from me again soon.